welcome back, or welcome if you are new here. My name is Chloe, and in today's video we have a reading vlog. So it is the weekend, and this weekend I want to challenge myself to complete one book. Now, I'm not going to go crazy like I would normally do and try and read like 3 or 4 books in a weekend. I just want to get through one, and it is all in the name of trying to get out of the reading slump. Zero pressure reading, if you will. So with that in mind, I decided that I didn't want to read a high fantasy because they tend to be quite long. I'm not really in the mood to continue on with any of the series that I'm in. Don't really want to start a new series and have to learn about new characters and go through all of the world building and the lore. So I just was not in the mood for that. However, I'm also not really in the mood for a cutesy YA romance either. So with all of that in mind, I have finally, after much deliberation, settled on 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. Now, this book got huge hype when it came out back in 2022, and I'll be honest, I kind of stayed away from it a little bit on purpose because of that hype. Hyped books kind of scare me a little bit because I feel like if you go into them with your expectations way up here, it kind of ruins the reading experience a little bit for me. So I've been a bit scared to read it, but now that everything sort of died down, I know that people really love it. It feels like a good time to read this book. So I have deliberately stayed away from all of the reviews that I can. I don't know anything about the book other than what's written on the blurb. And I kind of like that. I kind of like going into a book blind, especially a sort of shorter contemporary one like this. So who knows if I'm going to like it, but it was a Reese's Book Club pick. So, I mean, it can't be bad, right? I don't know, we'll see. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into some reading. Okay, so quick update. I am 56 pages in, and so far first impressions are, I think it's going to be an unexpectedly funny book. The opening scene in the prologue with our main protagonist Eva and her near-death experience, shall we say, was hilarious. So we are introduced to her and also a few side characters. We get a brief flashback into Eva's childhood, and then are also very briefly introduced to our second protagonist, Shane. So as a quick update for anyone that doesn't know, the book follows Shane and Eva, who are both authors. Shane is a novelist and Eva writes vampire erotica, so completely different genres, but they met back in their senior year of high school and they had a whirlwind week-long love affair and then never saw each other again, and now 15 years later they are reintroduced at an author event. So this is kind of where we are, just really setting the scene. We've had a few flashbacks and now I have just gotten to that moment where they both meet again. So all in all, a solid start. I'm going to stop it there for the day though, because I do have a few other things that I need to get done before it gets too late. So I'll probably pick the book back up tomorrow. But I've been reading for about an hour, like I said, 56 pages in, and so far so good. Alright guys, so I am just over the halfway point. Turns out that Eva and Shane's childhood encounter is way more dark than I was expecting it to be. I thought it was just going to be like a cutesy summer fling, but then at the end of the summer someone moved away and they lost contact and it was like a one that got away sort of deal. No, absolutely not. It is nothing like that, and I don't want to give too much away because spoilers, obviously, but it definitely feels like it's building up to some big traumatic moment. Also, in the present day, I've just finished the dream house scene. If you know, you know. And I have to say, I really like that this book isn't super graphic, in your face smut. Like, there is smut, but it's tasteful, you know? Honestly, sometimes it's just nice to have tasteful smut, you know? Also, there is an absolute shit ton of pop culture references, so if I'm being honest, sometimes that feels a little bit forced to try and make everything seem more relevant, but I think that might also just be a me problem rather than a problem with the actual story itself, but who knows. Regardless, I am probably going to finish this tomorrow. I feel like I'm flying through it. It's a really good read so far. I am definitely enjoying it. I absolutely love how the author has handled some really difficult topics, which I'll get into a little bit more when I have finished it and give you my final thoughts, but so far it is a beautifully written story. 10 out of 10. Could this be my first 5-star read of the year? Maybe. It might be. I think we might be on for a 5-star read, but we'll see. We'll finish it tomorrow and I will let you know how it goes. So I finished 7 Days in June today and I have some thoughts. So buckle up. This is probably going to be quite a long discussion, but before I get into it, there will definitely be some mild spoilers here, so if you are planning on reading the book and don't want to be spoiled, maybe pause and come back to this after you've read it. I don't want to be held responsible for ruining anyone's reading experience, so you have been warned. Leave now. Okay, so like I mentioned at the start, 7 Days in June is about our two main protagonists, Eva and Shane. They first met when they were teenagers. They had, in their senior year, a week-long, very tumultuous fling, and then they never saw each other until they reunited at an author event 15 years later. So right off the bat, it's given second chance romance, one who got away, but honestly it's so much darker and way more sophisticated than that. So I absolutely loved the writing style and the pacing. First of all, Tia Williams has a very almost poetic writing style, so the plot flowed really nicely and there wasn't any part of the book that I felt like it was dragging. I mean, to be fair, it took place over the course of a week, so you would probably actually have a harder time making it drag. But it flowed nicely. It all moved along quite well. Also, I think the fact that we sort of flip-flopped between present day and then had some flashbacks from the week that they spent together as teenagers really helped to keep things moving, and it was unexpectedly funny. There was lots of witty, sarcastic dialogue and I found myself laughing along to it multiple times, so that was a nice surprise as well. Now, the main characters Eva and Shane also had great chemistry, but I think most importantly, I absolutely loved the relationship that Eva had with her daughter Audrey, who provides most of the comic relief in the book, and she is way smarter than any 12-year-old has any right to be. But she was hilarious in a kind of annoying but endearing sort of way. I think it was also incredible to see how Eva juggled being a full-time writer, single mom, and also her disability. So again, for anyone who isn't in the know, Eva has a chronic illness. She has chronic migraines that are totally debilitating, and I actually didn't know this until after I had finished the book and I had read some reviews on Goodreads, but apparently the author also suffers from chronic migraines. So I guess that was a sort of little bit of a self-insert there, you know, and probably the main reason why it was done with such care and compassion and written so well, if she was talking from personal experience. But there was great disability rep, but not just disability rep, but also a hidden disability, which I don't think you see very often in books. There's actually a really nice section later in the book where Eva is describing to Shane how the migraines have impacted her life and her previous marriage, her ability to parent Audrey. So she had sort of described that her previous marriage broke down because she realised how unhappy her ex-husband was in having to care for her through all of her flare-ups. She had to do a lot of parenting from bed, but at no point did it feel pitiful. At no point did it seem as if she was trying to invoke sympathy. She has a very much this is just my life, we get on with it and we make it work sort of attitude. And I think that gives a lot of strength and power and resilience to the character, and I absolutely love that about her. Don't get me wrong, Shane also has a very complex history and backstory, but for me, Eva was by far the more compelling character, and I loved seeing things from her point of view. So moving into some things that I didn't like. Now let's start with the huge elephant in the room. And this is definitely a spoiler, so if you haven't left, go now. But the week that they spent together as children was just not it for me. Apparently it was inspired by Romeo and Juliet, and I can totally see that in the sort of insta love that they had for one another. But for me, it wasn't really love so much as it was like a dangerous codependent infatuation that developed in a drunken, drug-fueled haze. And I'm not entirely sure that that sends a particularly healthy message. That being said, it was never supposed to be seen as a healthy relationship. So in that sense, the author did an incredible job of describing how messed up the two were. But I'm just not sure how believable it is to think that two people who spent a week together as children, where they were drunk and high the whole time, can still have such all-consuming feelings for each other 15 years later. It blows my mind a little bit. Like, I can't imagine spending a week with someone when I'm in high school and as an adult now, 10, 12 years later, still being obsessed with that person in the same way. Like, it doesn't translate for me. Also, I think I should probably note here that there are major trigger warnings for drug and alcohol abuse, sexual assault, suicidal thoughts, neglect, self-harm, just tons of stuff. I told you it was a dark book. So if any of those things are difficult for you, then please do read with care. I love them both as adults, and I really enjoyed seeing them work through their difficulties. So Eva with her disability and being a single mom and kind of having this little bit of an identity crisis with her career. And then Shane on the flip side has a lot of mental health problems, a lot of addiction. So he's an alcoholic, he's a drug addict, or was previously, and he's currently sober. So the two of them not only trying to work on themselves but also rekindle that relationship. It was a really nice thing to read, but I really struggled to see how teenage Eva and Shane, who, let's just be real, were a hot mess, can then translate into the adult romance that we see later in the book. But yeah, maybe that's just a me problem. There's also quite a nice overarching theme of nature versus nurture, in my opinion. So one of the major plot points is the two characters trying to overcome these generational curses and do better for the children that are in their lives. So Eva with her daughter Audrey, and Shane for the children that he mentors, despite the upbringing that they both had. So we see this mentioned quite a lot, particularly in Eva's case, who we're told repeatedly has this really fascinating and rich history with all these enigmatic females in her family tree, but we only really see brief flashes of this. So the whole identity crisis that I was touching on is Eva is an erotica author who is kind of a little bit fed up. She's in a bit of a rut. She feels like her career's stagnant and she really wants to write this fulfilling, compelling novel about all of the women in her family and their past and all of the things that they faced, all of the challenges that they had to overcome being Black women in the South. And we see glimpses of that later in the book as she starts to research that novel, but I wish it was fleshed out a little bit more because we only see it in the last maybe 50 or so pages, and I think that would have been really interesting to see it explored and that novel actually come to fruition and her having a little bit more. Can you hear that? There's a lorry reversing outside. How rude. But to see her having a little bit more fulfillment in her career whilst we also learn more of her backstory. But again, I think that's probably more of a me problem because it's not really the point of the book and I don't see how that could have been done without making it a ridiculously long novel and seriously deviating from the point. So basically what I'm trying to say is I need another book that is Eva's book. I would read that. I would need Tia Williams to publish that, please, and thank you. Also, speaking of Eva's books, she, like I said, is an erotica novelist, and we find out quite early on that her Cursed series is being given a movie adaptation, which obviously she's super excited about. So she goes to meet directors, and the one that is willing to produce her film tells her that she plans on casting white actors for her Black main characters. And Eva really struggles with the idea of her characters being whitewashed, but also that she needs the film to be made because she's a struggling single mom and she needs the money and she needs to be able to provide for her family, but she wants to stay true to not only her own heritage, but the characters and their whole world as well. And I think that that could have opened the door to a really interesting discussion about the prevalence of whitewashing in Hollywood, but it was only really mentioned once and then again a bit later on, and for me it was then sort of just swept under the rug and we never really saw it anything again, which I thought was a shame. But again, it's not really the point of the book. It would have been nice if it had been fleshed out a little bit more. That all being said, like I said right at the start, I really enjoyed this book. I can totally see why it has so many good reviews, and I absolutely recommend it if you've not read it. I sort of flip-flop back and forth between 4 and a 4.5 stars, but I think I'm going to settle on 4 just for the little things that were bugging me. Also, I think I mentioned this yesterday. There's a lot of pop culture references, like a lot, and it feels a little bit forced sometimes. And for me, I don't personally like too many pop culture references in a book because I think it dates it quite a lot. And so I found that quite annoying, and reading it, some of the other reviews, I know a lot of other people felt the same, but it didn't detract from my enjoyment enough for me to take off any more than a star for that and all of the other things that I just mentioned combined. So definitely an excellent read and exactly what I wanted from this weekend of reading. I'm feeling like I'm slowly starting to get that spark for reading back again, so I'm excited to see what other ones I can pick up next week. Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up there. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more bookish content from me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.